Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Planter Sessions. My name is Mark Hadley and I'm just going to be your facilitator this morning. In a moment, I'll be handing over to our guests, but I just wanted to begin by saying welcome and thank you very much for registering for one of the Geneva Push Planter Sessions. We try and do our very best to make sure that this is a very focused time where you'll understand, something quite essential and practical about Australian church planting. And each month, we're hoping to bring someone new to you who've got something to contribute not just from what God has taught them in the line of the work, but also their spiritual insight. And particularly, we'll be talking to Hans Kristensen this morning. I'll let Al talk about him in a moment. But before we get underway, I just wanted to let you know that there are a couple of practical things you want to keep in mind as we take care of our session this morning. The first is that we're just audio at present. So if you're just seeing something like you should be seeing our planner sessions title, which is location, location, location. So don't worry, that'll change as we go through. That's a PowerPoint that we're running. We'll be introducing video in the next couple of months, just as soon as we're comfortable that we can do it successfully. And so it's a good experience for everyone. Also, we want to keep in mind that you actually have the opportunity to participate in our webinar this morning, which means that you have the opportunity to submit questions. You'll see on your GoToWebinar control panel that you have the opportunity to submit questions, and I'll feed them to Al and Hans as they chat so that you can actually have your specific needs addressed while we're doing this. And before we go on with the webinar, I really want to say a big thank you to EA Insurance. EA Insurance actually makes this entire thing possible. They are basically picking up the tab so that you can learn as much as you can about church planning in Australia. And one of the things you really want to understand about church planning is that there are legal implications for doing it in Australia, one of which is insurance. So if you haven't sorted out the insurance side of church planning yet, then we'd recommend you start with a chat with EA. They can help you sort out everything from public liability to building, property, contents insurance, as well as let you know about the issues you probably haven't even thought of yet. So ea.org.au is the place to go, and we thank them for their support this morning of the Planter Sessions. Well, I'm actually going to bring Al online. I'm just unmuting him because I can't stand him talking over me. So Al, good morning, and thank you very much for running the webinar for us this morning.
Good morning, Mark. Great to be here. Thanks, mate.
No worries. And also, obviously, I'll let you do the introduction of our guest of honour.
Okay, thank you. Well, our guest of honour this morning is Hans Kristensen. Welcome, Hans.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I'm a guest of honour, but how about we just say guest?
Okay, be my guest.
Thank you.
Mate, you started Resolved Church, is it about 3 years ago? How'd you like to give us kind of a quick plot of history of kind of the history of Resolved, how you got started, just kind of a brief overview?
Sure, we started for a bit over 4 years ago. We'll be 5 years in March, and we started with 6 people, and we were looking to reach out to musicians and artists. We wanted to be a theologically conservative, culturally liberal, inner-city church, reaching out to 18 to 30-year-olds with a specific view of musos and artists. So that was our vision. And so we went down that track. The interesting thing was we didn't get many musos and artists. We got people, other people, and we tweaked the vision so it's more broad. We're seeking to impact the city of Sydney with the love of Jesus for God's glory. The irony is that we've got more musos and artists now than we had when we went in our first few years. So that's been the people we wanted to reach, but basically we're trying to reach out to people in the inner city.
Okay, now people who don't know you may not know why musicians and artists, mate. Why did you have that particular focus to begin with? What is it about you?
I was I have been a professional musician in the past, so I've gigged and that kind of thing, and so a lot of my friends who are musicians were interested in Jesus, but not really the way the church packaged him. So whether it be a conservative evangelical church who would just speak in Christianese, or a church that was more charismatic that kind of dressed Jesus up to be this successful guy and you can be successful, they didn't really dig. So we decided to plant a church that was reach out to them in a biblically faithful way. So that was the idea.
Biblically faithful. There's lots of biblically faithful churches in this city.
Yeah.
What would you be doing different to if you're going to reach these guys? What did you decide that you would do differently?
I think it's trying to make everything accessible. So when I went to some really good churches when I was at Moore College and the year before Moore College, but when I brought my friends there, the knowledge gap was huge. There was a bunch of assumed knowledge that was a barrier. And some of the things that we were talking about in church were specifically aimed at Christians without even thinking about the outside world. But also, I think we're trying to contextualize. We're trying to figure out what are the things that the gospel says that people will agree with, and therefore, talk about that well. But also, what are the things that the gospel, that people outside may not like about the gospel, and how do we talk about that in a way that they get to see what God's heart is in this matter? So it's really thinking hard and then acting on it about the hopes, the dreams, and the beliefs of the outside world.
Okay. How's that affected the kind of meetings that you run? Okay, at some stage, you've got to turn that into backsides on seats and so on.
Yeah, so it's our meetings are very jargon free. We explain everything, so we we explain everything. I'm trying in the sermon at every point where I apply. I'm trying to apply to both Christians and not Christians. So even if it's something like, so we're doing money for the next 4 weeks, it may not be give your life to Jesus to a person that's a non-Christian, but it is to say that if you become a Christian, you've got to realize that Jesus demands all of your life. It's not just a little bit on Sunday. It's actually about money and your sexuality and that kind of thing. So it's speaking directly also to the non-Christian that is there.
Okay. Oh, that's good, mate. Now we've got to have bums on seats and teach the Bible to people, and some of that has to happen in a building or a location. That's what we're talking about this morning. In the history of Resolve, I think you've met in, is it 3 different venues?
Yeah, 3 different venues. The first one was
take us through those and why you met there and kind of the positives and negatives of them.
Yeah, sure. The first place we kicked off at is the Newtown Neighbourhood Centre, which is directly across from Newtown train station. So if you know Newtown at all, down the southern end of King Street, it kind of breaks off into King Street and Enmore Road. We were right there, so there's a picture on the screen. That was great. I got one person to count how many people passed that on a Sunday while we were setting up, and about 3,000 people walked past that on that particular Sunday. So it was there was a lot of traffic going by, great location, but one of the hard thing with that was just set up and pack up. We could not, we had to store everything off site. They didn't have anything except chairs that we could use. And so bringing a PA and all the music gear week in, week out just got tiring. And in the end, we experienced a lot of setup fatigue. And that's partly due to the location. I think that looking back also that was partly due to not well-managed setup and pack-up teams. So the second place we moved to... How long did you do that
for, mate? How long were you there for?
A bit over a year and a half, I think, or a year and a half. Yeah, a year and a half, I'd say.
Okay, and the reason you moved, was that mainly because of setup, pack-up fatigue?
Yeah, it was. Which, looking back, we probably should have explored ways to get around that. But yeah, so the next place we moved to was the Roxbury Hotel in Glebe, in St John's Road in Glebe, and they had a smaller room, but everything was set up pretty much except chairs. We just had to get chairs out and a few small things like Bibles and that kind of thing. So that was great. Had a great vibe. We could eat downstairs afterwards, which was great for community. It was very easy to invite your friends to church because it was at a pub. The problems we had was the room was a bit small. Well, there was three. The room was a bit small. We needed room for creche because people started having children, and we needed room for creche, which they didn't have. And thirdly, we couldn't manage the space really well. And what I mean by that is that if something was happening in the pub, it would ultimately affect us in our room. So they would have a jazz fusion jam session once every 2 weeks, and we literally sometimes couldn't hear the preacher because of this band that was on. And unfortunately, the management didn't jump in and say, "Hey guys, you've got to move on," for about 6 months. And so that was an issue for us. And the management were great to us, but the every week they would say, "Hey, we're going to sort this out. We're going to sort this out." It just didn't happen, unfortunately.
So the management weren't against you, but they're running a pub, not a church, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they were looking out for their best interests. The irony was they admitted to us that we brought in more money over the bar than that fusion jam session did. So, yeah.
You want to be careful what circles you better not make that public, mate. Never say that on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. I'll lose friends very quickly. So.
Okay, so you left. You chose to leave there.
Yeah, we chose to leave there, and we have moved to Golden Grove, which is on 5 Forbes Street in Newtown, which is right near Moore College. That is not a picture for Golden Grove at all. So anyway, but I think it's near there where that picture is. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Golden Grove is run by a group of people who make up the congregation at the Healing Centre at St Andrew's Cathedral. There's spacious grounds and a room which fits about 70 to 80 people. And so, yeah, so that's good. I think the problem is, once again, it's a space we don't control 100%. So we don't own it, and there's always going to be some kind of tension between the people that own it and run it and what we want. So there's always that conversation no matter what venue you're in. But I think the other thing that's been an issue for us is the set out. It's behind a big brick wall, and you actually have to walk up a path to come to the space where we meet, and that big brick wall can be intimidating, and so we've had to figure out how do we do welcoming there well. And so
is that another way of saying it's just hard to find, mate?
Yeah. It's another way of saying it's hard to find, but also I think it doesn't lend itself to a welcoming venue either.
Right. My memory of that place is that it was built as a kind of a retreat, so the wall is actually to keep people out.
Yeah, exactly. It was actually originally a Catholic convent, I think, or monastery. Yeah. Okay. And so I think some people bought it for like $300,000 in the mid-'80s, and now it'd be worth millions.
Money. Yeah. Okay. Now, at the end of all of that, that's some positives and some pain. Well, we got guys thinking about church planting. I know for our little home church, we've got to make a decision about venue in the next 6 to 12 months. We've outgrown a lounge room. What have you learned about location, buildings, and mission? What's your wisdom on that?
Yeah, I think it's very important obviously, for mission, I think the best building we had for mission was the original one, Newtown Neighbourhood Centre. Looking back, there was something for our people going from Newtown to Glebe, which is just one suburb over, but in the middle of those two suburbs is Parramatta Road. And Parramatta Road presented a almost like a barrier for some people, this mental barrier. And so
Wait a minute,
even though it was
can you back that one up? Parramatta Road's only 100 metres wide, okay?
Yeah.
And yet you're saying it's a big deal in terms of urban planning, the way people think. So is 100 metres not just 100 metres?
No, and I haven't figured out why it was such a big deal, but we did get when we started there, everyone thought it was the greatest thing in the world. But then after a while, we heard that this move creates more time to get to all that kind of thing. So it wasn't. Yeah, I'm still scratching my head as to why it was such a big deal. But we got people saying, "Hey, this is actually a big deal," and
I've had people tell me. Yeah, I've had people tell me that in the city, anyway, distance is in the head rather than than just kilometres.
Yeah.
It's how far to feel it is. That might be the factor.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, one was right in the guts of Newtown, and for the other one you had to go down King Street, which King Street on a Sunday, it could be another 15, 20 minutes. And so that was an issue, even though you're only travelling a couple, or like 1 or 2 k's more. The other thing with venues is the Roxbury Hotel is on a sleepy road. St John's Road is not a bustling road, whereas King Street is. And so that's going to create a different vibe also, not only for people bringing their friends, but also walk-ins off the street. And also, I think it's going to create a different atmosphere for your church. So if you come from hustle and bustle and you come into the venue, you're going to, we found that you had more energy rather than people just coming in from kind of like a sleepy street into a pub where there's hardly anyone there coming up to church.
Okay. Very interesting. More to say about location and mission?
Yeah. I think you've got to figure out who you're going for. And that should really dictate as to where you're going to plant, or like the venue. So, for example, if I am going to reach out to young families, I'll probably do it in a school. I'll probably meet in a school. If I'm trying to get young hipsters, a school's probably not the best place. I think the other thing, the vibe of your location, as much as you can, has to reflect the people you're trying to reach out to. So the Roxbury did do that very well. We've had, I think there is a disconnect between the vibe of where we're at now at Golden Grove and who we're trying to meet. So I would say
the vibe of a building, the vibe of a location. You think it's that important?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I don't think it's the ultimate consideration, and I think the problem is when you're talking about locations, it's hard to find something, especially in the inner city. So in the end, you've got to kind of make some compromises. But look, I will be trying to get something that really matches your vibe. I will go location first, but vibe would come second for me.
Okay. So you're rusted on core team members will turn up no matter where you are. Is it your fringe or your cold visitors that you're thinking about in terms of vibe?
It's cold visitors. It's not really the fringe members so much for me. It is the invitation of a friend. So if like worst case scenario, say you're not going to invite your friend if you're a young you're 19, you're at uni, and we're meeting in a retirement home. It's just the wrong vibe. But you may invite your friend to a room that's well appointed, that's got some kind of that looks clean, that's easy to get to. So for us, what we found is the different locations meant that different people would invite, or found it easy to invite and bring people along.
Right. So you're trying to make it easy for people to bring their friends, bring kind of the least unease. Okay.
Yeah.
A question then. You've been through, you learn things. Often we learn things the hard way and so on through difficulties. What advice would you have for, we've got people out there thinking about planting churches and location. What advice would you have from them from what you've learned over those 5 years?
Yeah, I think I'm maybe repeating myself here, but I think the three questions I'd be looking at is, first of all, who are you looking to reach out to, and trying to find a location that works best for that. So I think I've covered that. The second thing is, who owns it? Who owns it and what do they like? Try to find out, has it been good for the people who have worked with them? If the people who work with them have found it to be good, I think you'll be on a good playing field. So I do research about that. Who owns it and what do they like? Because the problem is every venue which hires itself out, the people are going to be nice at the start, and I think you want to not only take that first impression, but you also want to do some research and go, hey, for example, with this pub, I should have asked people about whether they're hard with people, when they want them to leave. So this jazz fusion band, they kept saying to me, hey, these guys should go, but it took them 6 months, and that created issues for us as a church. Is the person who ultimately leads this organization where you're partnering, whom you're partnering with, can you trust them if they say this is going to happen? Does it happen always like that? Because that's going to create issues and tensions for you if you go to their staff and they say, oh, the boss said this, and then you go to them and it's a totally different thing. So who are you getting in bed with, so to speak? I think, and the last one is the vibe of the place. You wanna look at the vibe, and if you can match it to the people you're trying to reach out to.
Okay. Who do you want to read? Who owns the place and what do they like to work with, and the vibe of the place? So would you have any advice for say young guys who have been offered an old church building, which sometimes happens, and it's free, compared to paying for a venue somewhere?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think wherever you wherever you find yourself, you're going to find pluses and minuses, and you've got to figure out whether the pluses outweigh the minuses. So for us right now, could we meet in a church? I think we could, because I think our people vibe, the people that we've got, create such a community that I think is attractive. So if we met in a church, I don't think it would be an issue. So much. But I think you've got to just weigh it up and for your demographic, it might be good to meet in a church. So, for example, if I'm trying to reach out to people from a Mediterranean background who think an independent church is a cult, meeting in a church could give credence to you as a church planter and as a church. So that could be good. But if you're trying to meet and reach out to people who are disenfranchised with church, meeting in church would be the wrong thing. So it's a hard question to ask. You've just got to weigh it up. Also, money's a consideration. If you're paying $400 a week for a venue and you haven't got that kind of money, you might have to jump at a church. But yeah, so you've just got to weigh it up. And these kind of decisions, do not be desperate to find a location. Desperate people make dumb decisions, and I think and decisions that are not thought through. You want to take time and you want to think through the location very carefully.
Okay, so as you look 3 years ahead for yourself, how important is location in the, like, are you thinking we've got to get this resolved, knock down this wall, move? What are you, or are you fairly relaxed about it?
Oh no, we're already thinking about the next location, and we're canvassing different options. So, and that's because we want to be on the front foot with this kind of thing, and we want to give ourselves time to think about the next move. So, so I think it's very, very important, especially in the inner city. I think to have options when you're moving is such an important thing. So it's very important for us. We're putting some time into it right now, and so yeah.
How have you found those locations?
Oh, very good question. We've gone to the councils and just seen what they have. I think I've got a relationship with Sydney City Council and the people that manage the venues. I think also we just go knock on the door of every pub, and say, hey, this is what we want. What have you got? And also try to network with the different churches around and say, hey, what kind of things have you got? Talk to the schools. So I'd be looking at schools, councils, pubs, and churches. I'd be talking to those people and saying, what do you got?
Yep. I made friends with a lady who handled the bookings at our local council. She was really nice, and that's a very good friendship to have. Here's a question, Hans, from Josh. What weight do you put on visibility, attractiveness, of a venue compared to it being functional for ministry? So how does pretty compare with functional?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Josh. I think ultimately you want both, and I think you've got to ask, if you've got a functional venue, can you dress it up really pretty? If you've got a pretty venue, can it be functional? I think you've got to grab both of them, and kind of, unfortunately, you won't find the perfect venue generally. You've got to compromise in some areas. So you've got to ask whether the people you're trying to reach out to, whether they don't really care about functionality. So what do they care about more? Is it more important for it to be a nice venue that reflects the people that you're trying to reach out to, or is it more important to be functional? You've got to tailor, or you've got to ask that question based on the people you're trying to reach out to. So that's how I'd say. I can't really give an answer to that 100% because I think it really matters who you're reaching out to. So, for example, this is going to be a generalization, and I'm going to offend someone with this, but just say you're trying to reach out to people in the inner city who are tax lawyers and accountants. I don't think they're really going to care about how pretty the venue looks. But if I'm reaching out to artists, well, it really, really does matter. So that's going to be, you can see how that question is going to be answered differently based on and I'm sorry to all tax lawyers.
I'd just like to say tax lawyers have a kind of an artistic side as well.
especially
look,
Scott Sanders.
Yes, we know Scott. He's really got an artistic side. Here's a question from Dan, and actually, I was wondering this myself. What are some easy ways to enhance your meeting space?
That's a very good question. We tried to do the whole vibe thing and put art everywhere and do that kind of thing, and that works to a certain extent. But I think the vibe's got to be created with the people, and you've got to work out how do you get a positive, uplifting vibe with the people first. Vibe, I think, is 80 to 90% people. And you can be in a great room that looks fantastic with lights and candles and whatever, and yet have really the wrong people. It's going to create a terrible vibe. So there's that. The other thing, what I'd be doing is, I'm the wrong person to ask this question. I have always outsourced these kind of questions to people that know what they're doing far more than me.
Well, there will be people in any Christian people have this gift of kind of the vibe and decorating or whatever. Yeah. I only know the names of 5 colours. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would be also saying take some risks with the space. Try it a totally different way. What would happen if you set up the chairs in a round instead of like a classroom, for example? I think the other thing, get your artists to do some art. Put that around. Work with lighting. Basic lighting can go a long way. You can get lighting that you can throw up on to walls. That's very cheap and very easy to set up. I think the other thing that I do is work out what you're doing with music. Canned music before the service. So
music affects the vibe a lot. Yep.
So we have upbeat music. We have stuff like Jamiroquai Tower of Power, really upbeat kind of almost dancey kind of music at the volume that you need to speak loud to talk to someone, and that creates an energy that if you're coming into a dead room. That affects the vibe.
And I also suggest the smell of good coffee and food does a lot for the vibe as well.
Yeah, good call. Yeah.
So if you want people in the inner city, don't have international roast. And if there's food, yep. Hey mate, here's another one from Mark. Hans, have you ever had any blowback or pushback from planting in a space not traditionally associated with Christian ministry, like a pub, etc.?
Yeah, we have to a certain extent, but I think the funny thing when we moved to the pub, the problem was the pushback was people who were concerned with people who were struggling with drink in our congregation. And so they were Christian people who were more concerned for their brothers and sisters in Christ. There was a bit of pushback from friends of mine who asked whether it was a wise idea, but no non-Christian pushback. In fact, non-Christians thought it was weird and kind of like a novel idea.
Yeah. Okay. Let me keep going. Hans, this is from Andy. Hans, how did you cope with the idea of having alcohol at a venue? This is a double click on some of that stuff you just mentioned. Did it create any special problems? Did you have to address it from the pulpit, so to speak?
Yeah, we thought about before going to the Roxbury. We were like, oh, what happens if there's alcoholics? And we thought either they're going to be around alcohol in an environment with a bunch of Christians, and they will suppress their alcoholism, or they won't drink as much, which will be a good thing because they'll be able to control themselves around alcohol, or they'll just drink too much and it will come out in the open. We can deal with it. And so I talked to a few people who drug and alcohol counsellors about those two things, and they confirmed that that's what they'd be thinking too. That it's either they're going to learn how to control their drinking, and that's going to be a good thing, or it's just going to explode right in front of us, and then we can deal with it. So we didn't preach against it. I don't drink. I've never drunk. So it was kind of weird for me to plant in a church, but in a pub. So we didn't address it from the pulpit. We had no issues with it whatsoever.
Okay.
That was just our experience.
The fact that you don't drink gives permission for other people to choose just to have, a Coke or a softie or whatever as well.
Yeah,
so,
it does.
You can lead that way. It's a good opportunity for Christians to love other people and choose not to have a drink.
True, but I did.
Right, and it's okay to say no to have a drink, and others can say yes.
Yeah, that's true, but a few guys did question my masculinity when I didn't down a beer. So, but anyway, I lived through that.
That's their problem. That's their problem.
Yeah.
Now, mate, one other question. Re the setup fatigue. You said you probably would have been good to stay in the original venue, and you probably learned a few things. What would you do differently? I know a lot of churches that have got very tired setting up in school halls and so on, hundreds of chairs each night. What would you do differently if you were back in that other venue?
This sounds really weird, but I think I would have ditched the PA. We had a very echoey room, and I think I would have just been cool with not having a PA podcast, that kind of thing. I have a loud voice. I could have preached there fine. In fact, when I preached, they muted me through the speakers. They just had my mic on, so it was recorded. We had an acoustic band, and everyone sung loudly. And so I would have just gone back and just gone acoustic, I think. The other thing I would have challenged people on was, I think there was something in our leadership where people felt like they couldn't be doing setup because they were on other ministries, where I would have just pushed against that very hard and said, okay, no, we're all going to be on this, and put as many people as I can on setup. So
so by the time that you got big enough that you needed a PA system to speak or whatever, you'd have enough people there to kind of roster on to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we could have had more people rostered on. I think the other thing is setup fatigue happens also psychologically when we hit setup fatigue very hard in winter, when not many people were inviting their friends. And what I remember in January, February, March, April, when people were bringing their friends because it was pretty easy, on 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, come down, let's go and have something to eat and come to church. The guys' morale was high, but when we didn't see many people or any people come who were new, that's when they were like, oh, why am I doing this? So it's a leadership thing too, where you're reminding them how setup fits in to what we're doing. And so to kind of give them that vision of, hey, you guys are doing a great job and you guys are important. Let me remind you of how what you do here affects us as a church and affects the gospel going out, not only in Newtown but in Sydney and Australia. To give them that big vision, I think, would have been a good thing to do.
Okay. So leadership's not just about kind of being up the front and preaching or playing guitar. It's about stacking chairs as well.
It's about that, but also reminding the people week after week of why they are doing it and the impact that it has in the church.
Okay. Well, Hans, thanks very much. Yeah, go on. One last thing.
I would just say encouragement. I think one of the things that I think we've got this stupid theology that says, or practice that says, don't encourage a person face to face and say thank you for what you're doing and you're doing a great job. Why? Because they will want that all the time. I just think that's ridiculous. I think God has set us up in such a way that we crave human interaction, and there's a sense in which that is healthy to say to someone, hey, you're doing such a great job, thank you. I think we should have done that a lot more. Leaders need to encourage their people well in a way that focuses them on Jesus. So, to say, not just to go, you're awesome, but to go, hey, what you're doing is amazing, and it allows people to come and sit down on a seat and hear about Jesus. And so encourage them in that way. But we need to be able to say to people, thank you for the job you're doing also.
Yep. Well, Hans, I probably should say it was awesome, and you're amazing, and thank you for being with us.
Well,
good on you, mate.
That's
Thanks for
probably a
sharing
bit
your
too
wisdom.
far. But thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. I hope God continues to bless the work he's doing there at Resolved. I'm going to hand back to Mark, and Mark will wrap up the session. Thanks, Hans.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hans. And thanks very much, everyone who's been attending and sending the questions in this morning. We found it very helpful to actually direct a discussion and make sure you find out the very things that you want to know. I know myself, I learned a lot about planning, where you're going to plant and why, in fact, you're going to plant somewhere. Obviously, it's not just the first building that's available. So we also have some other events coming up, which we really want to draw to your attention now. The very next webinar, in fact, is about assessment. In fact, you need to be assessed. Al Stewart's going to be talking to Dan Godden and Aaron Boyd, two guys who've gone through the assessment process, in fact, are actually a few years into their church plants. And it's really worth thinking that through. If you're on the edge of things and you're wondering what Geneva Push can do for you, well, one of the main things the Geneva Push offers to people, aspiring church planters, is to basically put you through the ringer. That may not sound like such an attractive thing, but the truth is that we're very concerned to make sure that you are able and well thought out and well equipped to do what you need to do. And helping you think through that is one of the best things Geneva Push can do to put you on the path to having a successful church plant. Also, we have Al in Adelaide on August the 1st, so don't forget that you've got an opportunity if you're down south and you're going to be in Adelaide. I would definitely make the chance to get over and see Al as he talks about rich or poor. Now, rich or poor is our topic heading with a number of other speakers alongside of Al for talking about the funding model that you use with your church plant. Exactly how are you going to go into it? Are you going to go in with just what you've got in your pockets? Are you going to be looking for grants? Are you going to be trying to build instead through a denomination and get some financial support there? All those questions and more will be answered at Rich or Poor. We'll be providing the audio a few weeks on inside of the Geneva Push website. But that said, if you can be there, you can participate, you can ask questions, you can really get the information you need. And finally, Andrew Hurd will be doing Gospel-Driven Church soon, another excellent opportunity to work out how you're going to shape your congregation. All this information and more is available on our website under the events section, and we'd just like to encourage you to consider how you're best going to be able to do that. Well, once again, the planner sessions are something that was brought to you by EA Insurance. We'd just like to thank them for their support. Everyone over at EA Insurance has put a great deal of effort behind helping us make this possible, and there are hundreds of other Christian communities and, in fact, Christian not-for-profits that are thankful to EA Insurance for their insurance needs. So if you have questions for your church plant, Geneva recommends you get in contact with these guys at ea.org.au. We've had an excellent time this morning. This webinar will be available online in a week or so. Also, I'd just like to draw your attention, when we sign up and when we finish, would you please take care and take a moment to fill out the survey that will be sent through to you. That's because it helps us shape the event much better so that you actually have the duration. We found out that people just wanted to know more, so we've run to 45 minutes rather than 30. If you'd like to shape the event and get the most out of the planner sessions, this is your opportunity to do so. Well, thanks again for putting in the time this morning. We look forward to seeing you at the next planner session.